December 1979, the Soviets thought a quick invasion of Afghanistan would secure their power. Instead, it turned into a decade-long disaster. How did it happen? This is Vanished Files, bringing you the raw truth of history's wars. Hit that subscribe button to join us for more hard-hitting war documentaries. Let's dive into the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan. In December 1979, Soviet tanks rumble across the Afghan border, heading for Kabul, while helicopters swoop over the rugged Hindu-Kush mountains to secure key passes. Moscow's Politburo has ordered this invasion to prop up Afghanistan's crumbling communist government, the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, or PDPA, which is losing ground to rebels controlling much of the countryside. The Red Army's top brass doubt they can tame Afghanistan's wild terrain and fierce tribes. So why did the Soviet Union, a global superpower, take this gamble? Afghanistan in the 1970s is a land caught between its ancient past and a turbulent push for modernity. After World War II, King Zahir Shah brings a fragile calm, introducing cautious reforms to keep conservative tribes and religious leaders from rebelling, while also stifling radicals, including communists with ties to the Soviet KGB. In 1964, he rolls out a liberal constitution, allowing political parties, which sparks a flurry of activity at Kabul's universities. Students form groups ranging from moderates to monarchists, Islamists and communists, including the PDPA, founded by Nur Muhammad Taraki, Hafizullah Amin, and Babrak Karmal, all inspired by the Soviet transformation of Central Asia. The PDPA dreams of radical change but plays moderate in public, winning over only a small circle of urban elites and Soviet-trained army officers. By 1967, the communists split into a hardline faction under Taraki and a milder one under Karmal, weakening their cause. Meanwhile, Islamists, inspired by Egypt's Muslim Brotherhood, formed Jamiat-e-Islami, pushing a conservative vision of a modern Islamic society. King Zahir even backs some Islamist efforts to counter Marxist influence. Afghanistan's place in the Cold War adds more tension. In 1960, Soviet-equipped Afghan troops clash with Pakistan over Pashtun borderlands, a dispute rooted in ethnic ties that Pakistan wants settled to focus on its rivalry with India. Kabul, officially non-aligned, leans on Soviet aid for roads and dams, but also welcomes American and West German engineers. Both superpowers enjoy perks. In Afghanistan, Soviet technicians live as comfortably as Americans, with lavish housing and private theaters. This aid fuels a small urban middle class, but the countryside resists social changes like women's education, which gains traction in cities. By the late 1960s, Afghanistan lags behind other developing nations, and Zahir hesitates to deepen democracy, fearing communist influence. In 1973, Mohammad Daoud Khan, a former prime minister, seizes power in a military coup, at first partnering with moderate communists before turning on them. He rules as a strongman, jailing or killing opponents and purging the army and bureaucracy. Islamists, angered by Daoud's progressive policies, find a haven in Pakistan, where Pakistan's intelligence service trains and arms them for raids like a failed 1975 attack on Afghan government buildings. Daoud's crackdown forces many Islamists to flee, joining thousands of Afghan refugees in Pakistan. He then courts aid from the US, Iran, and others, while signing deals with Moscow and warming ties with Pakistan. In 1977, Soviet leader Leonid Brezhnev warns Daoud about NATO workers in northern Afghanistan, calling them spies, but Daoud snaps back, insisting Afghanistan is free to choose its partners. This defiance, coupled with growing unrest, sets the stage for a communist coup. that will pull the Soviet Union deeper into Afghanistan's chaos, a move that will reshape the region and the Cold War. In April 1978, Kabul erupts in chaos as Communist Army officers, loyal to the People's Democratic Party of Afghanistan, or PDPA, roll tanks through the streets and send jets screaming overhead, overthrowing Mohammed Daoud Khan in a bloody coup known as the Saur Revolution. The PDPA, unified after years of factional splits and backed by Soviet KGB support, kills Daoud and over 1,000 of his followers, seizing power in a move that shocks both Moscow and Washington, each suspecting the other's involvement. Nur Muhammad Taraki and Hafizullah Amin lead the new Democratic Republic of Afghanistan, launching a radical agenda of land redistribution, women's rights, and secular reforms, aiming to drag the country into modernity. These policies, however, ignite fury across a deeply traditional and religious nation, where tribal leaders and clergy see the PDPA as uprooting Afghan values. Resistance flares in the countryside, with Islamist groups, loosely called Mujahadeen, rallying support and gaining ground in the north and east. The PDPA responds with brutal force mass arrests, executions, and torture by the secret police and KGB-trained paramilitaries, alienating even the urban middle class that once backed Daoud's ouster. By 1979, the regime's grip weakens as internal rifts deepen between Taraki and the ambitious Amin, who pushes an even harsher line. Uprisings spread, and in February, the kidnapping of U.S. Ambassador Adolf Dubs in Kabul ends in disaster when Afghan forces, advised by the KGB, botch a rescue, killing him and prompting the U.S. to halt aid. In March, the western city of Herat explodes in rebellion and entire army division mutinies. Protesters lynch Soviet advisors and their families, and the government's crackdown leaves between 3,000 and 25,000 dead. In Kunar province, another revolt sees hundreds executed, witnessed by terrified villagers. Taraki, desperate, begs Moscow for troops, warning that the revolution will collapse without help. But the Soviet Politburo hesitates, stunned by the PDPA's reckless violence. KGB chief Yuri Andropov doubts socialism can take root in Afghanistan's feudal society and fears a military quagmire. Still, Moscow sends T-6 tanks, Mi-24 helicopters, and more advisors. Stopping short of ground troops, the Mujahadeen, now armed by Pakistan's ISI and supported by Iran, Saudi Arabia, and the US, grow bolder, noting Soviet advisors' presence in provinces like Panjshir and Qanar. By September, Amin outmaneuvers Taraki, orchestrating his murder and seizing power, a move that alarms Moscow, who suspect Amin's US ties and fear he might pivot away from Soviet influence. The Afghan army crumbles, with 40% deserting, leaving just 60,000 troops against a swelling insurgency of 40,000 Mujahideen controlling 4 provinces and much of the countryside. Amin's overtures to the US and UK heighten Soviet paranoia, with the KGB wrongly suspecting he's a CIA asset. In December, Andropov, once cautious, backs a limited intervention to oust Amin and install Babrat Karmal, a moderate PDPA figure, to salvage the revolution. On December 12th, the Politburo secretly approves Operation Baikal 79, deploying the 40th Army 52,000 troops, including motor rifle divisions and air assault units to secure key cities and roads. Soviet leaders believe a 6-month show of force will stabilize Afghanistan, but as troops prepare to cross the border, the stage is set for a daring and deadly strike to eliminate Amin, a move that will plunge the Soviet Union into a war far bloodier than they imagined. On December 25, 1979, Soviet troops surge across Afghanistan's northern border, their tanks and trucks grinding along roads built years earlier with American and Soviet aid, while helicopters buzz overhead, dropping paratroopers to secure the vital Saling Pass tunnel. The 40th Army, a force of 52,000 men with motor rifle divisions and air assault units, splits into two prongs, one racing through Mazar-i-Sharif and Kunduz toward Kabul, the other swinging through Herat and Shindon to Kandahar. At the same time, Operation Baikal 79 unfolds as 7,700 airborne troops, 890 for vehicles, and over 1,000 tons of ammunition land at Kabul and Bagram airfields, joining 2,000 Soviet soldiers already stationed there. Moscow's plan is a swift show of force meant to last 6 months, to prop up a new Afghan government and crush the growing Mujahadeen insurgency. But the real shock comes on December 27th, when Soviet Special Forces launch Operation Storm 333 to eliminate Hafizullah Amin, the PDPA leader Moscow distrusts for his brutal policies and suspected Western ties. For weeks, elite units, including the KGB's Zenit and ground teams, the GRU's Muslim Battalion of Central Asian soldiers in Afghan uniforms, and air assault troops 560 men in total have gathered in Kabul, posing as Amin's protectors. Amin, unaware, welcomes news of Soviet troops, believing they'll save his regime, even as he survives a KGB attempt to poison him with cola. The target is the Taj Beg Palace, a fortress on a mined hill, guarded by 2,500 Afghan troops, 3 T-5 for tanks and anti-aircraft guns. The Soviet assault splits into 12 groups. One neutralizes the tanks. Another storms the palace's main road with 6 BMPs, while others flank from the west or pin down nearby Afghan units with Ju-23 to Fashilkas and grenade launchers. At 7:15 p.m., gunfire erupts after the failed poisoning alerts Afghan guards, and Colonel Vasily Kolesnik orders a full attack. Soviet sabotage teams cripple Kabul's phone lines and disable Afghan tanks, while paratroopers seize key buildings like the radio station, secret police headquarters, and ministries. The palace assault as brutal BMPs are knocked out, forcing troops to advance on foot under heavy fire. Inside, KGB and Spetsnaz units blast through doors, hurl grenades, and fire automatic weapons, killing most of Amin's bodyguards. After 43 minutes, Amin and his 2 sons are dead, with around 100 Afghans killed or captured and at least 9 Soviet deaths, though some claim up to 100. The next day, Babrak Karmal arrives in Kabul, promising to end the PDPA's torture and executions. But his pre-recorded speech hides the ongoing killing of Amin's allies. Nearly all Storm 333 troops, including Kolesnik, earn medals, and the operation later becomes a legend in Russian military lore. Yet, Karmal's pledges ring hollow. 430,000 Afghans flee to Pakistan by January 1980, and the insurgency only grows fiercer. Moscow's gamble, driven by Cold War fears of losing Afghanistan to US influence, installs a new leader in just 72 hours, but sparks global outrage. President Jimmy Carter condemns Soviet expansionism. The UN General Assembly denounces the invasion, and the US, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia ramp up aid to the Mujahadeen, setting the stage for a grueling war that will bleed the Soviet Union for a decade. As Soviet troops settle into Afghanistan in early 1980, their lightning-fast invasion and the daring Operation Storm 333, which killed Hafizullah Amin and installed Babrak Karmal, unleash a storm of international backlash and fuel a growing insurgency that Moscow didn't expect. The Soviet Union hoped a 6-month show of force would stabilize the PDPA government and crush the Mujahadeen, but instead, the invasion galvanizes opposition. By January, over 130,000 Afghans have fled to Pakistan, joining Islamist fighters trained by Pakistan's ISI, who now draw support from the US, Saudi Arabia, and Iran. The United Nations General Assembly, packed with nations sensitive to colonial overreach, condemns the Soviet move, seeing Afghanistan's non-aligned stance betrayed by a superpower's aggression. President Jimmy Carter, shaken by Soviet tanks rolling into Kabul, declares the invasion a threat to global stability, warning that Moscow must choose between peaceful coexistence or costly colonial ambition. His administration, sensing a chance to bog the Soviets in their own Vietnam, ramps up aid to the Mujahadeen, though National Security Advisor's Zbigniew Brzezinski worries the rebels are too disorganized. Without stronger foreign backing, the US shifts its policy toward Pakistan, offering more arms and security guarantees, even easing pressure on Islamabad's nuclear ambitions, to ensure Pakistan becomes a pipeline for weapons and funds to the insurgents. Saudi Arabia's intelligence chief, Turki al-Faisal, matches US contributions, funneling cash through Pakistan's ISI to keep Soviet influence out of the Middle East. China and other Muslim nations also chip in, turning the Mujahadeen into a global cause. Back in Afghanistan, Karmal struggles to win over a skeptical population, his promises to end PDPA brutality undermined by the execution of Amin's loyalists and the Soviet military presence. The Mujahadeen, now controlling swaths of the countryside and for provinces, exploit this discontent, framing themselves as defenders of Islam and Afghan traditions against godless communists. Moscow's leaders, including Foreign Minister Andrei Gromyko, knew the invasion risked their image as champions of anti-colonial movements and could unravel years of détente with the West, yet they pressed ahead, driven by Cold War paranoia about losing Afghanistan to US influence. They drew confidence from past interventions in Czechoslovakia, Ethiopia, and Angola, where local communists led revolutions with Soviet help, hoping the PDPA could do the same. But Afghanistan proves different to its tribal society. Devout faith and rugged terrain defy the Soviet playbook. The Kremlin lacks the local knowledge and language skills needed to navigate this complex land, and their control over the PDPA is shakier than expected. Historians later debate why Moscow took this gamble. Some point to KGB advisors like Alexander Puzanov, a close ally of Nur Muhammad Taraki, who pushed for intervention, while others see Amin's erratic rule and suspected Western ties as the tipping point. What's clear is the invasion backfires far from securing a loyal ally. It traps the Soviet Union in a brutal, decade-long war. The US and its allies seize the chance to bleed their rival, funneling weapons and money through Pakistan, while the Mujahadeen grow stronger, setting the stage for a conflict that will drain Soviet resources, embolden global jihad, and reshape the Cold War's final chapter, all while Afghanistan descends into bloodshed and chaos. In the wake of the Soviet invasion of Afghanistan, the conflict spirals into a brutal quagmire that neither Moscow nor the Mujahadeen anticipated. As the Red Army's 6-month plan to stabilize the PDPA under Babrak Karmal stretches into a decade of relentless warfare. By 1980, the Mujahadeen, fueled by US, Saudi, and Pakistani support, control vast rural areas, ambushing Soviet convoys in the rugged mountains and slipping across the porous border to Pakistan. For weapons and training, the Soviet 40th Army, with its tanks and helicopters, holds cities like Kabul and Kandahar, but struggles to pacify the countryside, where tribal loyalties and deep Islamic faith rally villagers to the insurgents' cause. The PDPA's harsh reforms, like land redistribution and women's education, continue to alienate Afghans, and Karmal's government, propped up by Soviet advisors, fails to win hearts or minds, relying instead on secret police and brutal reprisals that only swell the Mujahadeen ranks. The US, eager to turn Afghanistan into a Soviet Vietnam, funnels millions in aid through Pakistan's EC, which arms fighters with rifles, rocket launchers, and later Stinger missiles, tilting the battlefield against Soviet air power. Saudi Arabia matches these funds, while Egypt and China supply additional weapons, transforming the insurgency into a global anti-communist crusade. Pakistan, now a key US ally, hosts millions of Afghan refugees and Mujahideen bases, leveraging the war to secure American arms and diplomatic cover for its nuclear program. Meanwhile, the Soviet Union pours billions into the war, deploying over 100,000 troops at its peak, but faces mounting losses, tens of thousands of soldiers killed or wounded, helicopters downed, and morale crumbling under guerrilla tactics. At home, Soviet citizens grow weary of the Afghan ulcer, as dissent brews over a conflict sold as a quick victory. Moscow's leaders, including Leonid Brezhnev and later Mikhail Gorbachev, grapple with the war's costs, which strain the economy and tarnish their global image, especially among non-aligned nations who see the invasion as imperialist. The Mujahadeen, though fractured by rival factions like Jamiat-e-Islami and others, unite under the banner of Jihad, drawing young fighters from across the Muslim world, including early figures like Osama bin Laden, who arrived to fund and organize. Afghanistan's terrain, its jagged peaks and hidden valleys, becomes a graveyard for Soviet ambitions. As small, mobile rebel units outmaneuver heavy armor, the war also reshapes the region. Pakistan's EC gains influence, channeling aid to favored groups, while Iran, despite its own revolution, backs some Shia fighters. By the mid-1980s, the conflict is a bloody stalemate, with civilian deaths climbing into the hundreds of thousands and millions displaced, many crowding refugee camps in Pakistan and Iran. Gorbachev, taking power in 1985, seeks an exit, but withdrawing without losing face proves tricky as the PDPA remains weak, and the Mujahadeen, now battle-hardened, sense victory. The war's ripples spread far beyond Afghanistan, fueling a global Islamist movement and setting the stage for future conflicts, while the Soviet Union's overreach accelerates its own decline. Back in 1980, as the world watched, the invasion had sparked a fire that no one could control, and Afghanistan, once a Cold War backwater, becomes a crucible of violence, ideology, and superpower rivalry. Its people caught in a relentless storm of destruction that will scar the nation for generations. As the Soviet-Afghan War grinds into the mid-1980s, Afghanistan becomes a bleeding wound for the Soviet Union, with the Mujahideen's guerrilla tactics and growing international support, turning the conflict into a costly stalemate that erodes Moscow's resolve. The Soviet 40th Army, now swollen to over 100,000 troops, controls urban centers and major roads, but cannot subdue the countryside, where Mujahideen fighters, armed with US-supplied Stinger missiles and Saudi-funded weapons, ambush convoys and down helicopters in the unforgiving mountains. Pakistan's ISI, flush with American and Saudi cash, runs training camps and funnels arms to insurgent groups, favoring hardline factions like Gulbuddin Hekmatyar's Hezb-e-Islami, while millions of Afghan refugees in Pakistan become a recruiting pool for the Jihad. The US, under President Ronald Reagan, escalates aid, seeing the war as a chance to weaken the Soviet Empire, while Saudi Arabia's contributions, matched dollar for dollar, draw on foreign fighters, including a young Osama bin Laden, who funds networks that will later birth Al-Qaeda. The PDPA government, led by Karmal, remains a Soviet puppet, its reforms despised by a population that views the regime as atheist and foreign. driving more Afghans to the Mujahadeen, who now number in the tens of thousands and control most rural areas. Soviet airstrikes and scorched earth campaigns killed tens of thousands of civilians, leveling villages and creating millions more refugees, but failed to break the insurgency's spirit. In Moscow, the war's toll mounts. Thousands of soldiers return in zinc coffins, and the economy buckles under military spending, fueling public discontent. When Mikhail Gorbachev takes power in 1985, he calls Afghanistan a bleeding wound and pushes for withdrawal. But the PDPA's fragility and the risk of a Mujahideen takeover complicate the exit. Gorbachev replaces Karmal with Mohammad Najibullah in 1986, hoping a less divisive leader can stabilize the regime. But Najibullah's reliance on Soviet troops and brutal secret police only deepens Afghan resentment. The war's global impact grows. The influx of arms and fighters strengthens Pakistan's ISI, which gains leverage over Afghan factions, while Iran supports Shia Mujahadeen, adding another layer to the conflict. The UN's attempts at peace talks, led by figures like Diego Cordovas, stall as Pakistan, Iran, and the US-backed insurgents demand a complete Soviet pullout. By 1988, Gorbachev, facing domestic pressure and a crumbling Soviet economy, signs the Geneva Accords, agreeing to withdraw all troops by February 1989. The pullout is a logistical feat, with the 40th Army retreating under constant Mujahideen attacks, leaving Najibullah's regime to fend for itself with Soviet aid, but no ground forces. The withdrawal marks a humiliating defeat for Moscow, emboldening anti-communist movements worldwide and hastening the Soviet Union's collapse by 1991. In Afghanistan, the war leaves a shattered nation, over 1 million dead, millions displaced, and cities in ruins. The Mujahideen's victory, however, sows chaos as rival factions turn on each other, paving the way for civil war and the Taliban's rise. The Soviet invasion, launched with confidence in 1979, ends as a cautionary tale of overreach. Its legacy, a radicalized jihadist movement and a fractured Afghanistan, while the Cold War's endgame shifts the global balance, with the US emerging stronger and Pakistan's role as a regional power cemented, all at the cost of a generation of Afghan lives. As the last Soviet troops roll out of Afghanistan in February 1989, leaving behind a war-torn nation and a fragile PDPA government under Mohammad Najibullah, the scars of the decade-long conflict reshape Afghanistan and the world in ways that echo for generations. The Soviet withdrawal, completed under the Geneva Accords, marks a bitter defeat for Moscow, with over 15,000 soldiers dead, tens of thousands wounded, and billions spent, draining the Soviet economy and hastening the collapse of the USSR by 1991. Afghanistan lies in ruins, over 1 million people killed, millions more displaced as refugees in Pakistan and Iran, and entire villages reduced to rubble by Soviet airstrikes and Mujahideen battles. Najibullah's regime, propped up by Soviet weapons and cash, clings to power in Kabul, but faces a fractured country where Mujahideen factions, once united against the Soviets, now vie for control, their unity shattered by ethnic rivalries and ideological splits. The US, Pakistan, and Saudi Arabia, having funneled billions in arms and funds to the insurgents, scale back support, leaving the Mujahideen to fight among themselves in a brutal civil war. Groups like Gabudin Hekmatyar's Hezb-e Islami and Ahmad Shah Massoud's Jamiat-e-Islami clash fiercely, turning Kabul into a battleground and plunging Afghanistan into chaos. The war's legacy extends far beyond its borders. The flood of weapons and battle-hardened fighters fuels a global jihadist movement, with figures like Osama bin Laden building networks that evolve into Al-Qaeda, setting the stage for future conflicts. Pakistan's ISI, strengthened by its role as a conduit for Western aid, emerges as a regional power broker, backing hardline factions to secure influence in Afghanistan, while also facing blowback from radicalized fighters on its own soil. The Soviet invasion, launched in 1979 to secure a communist ally, instead destabilizes the region, empowering Islamist militancy and shifting the Cold War's endgame, with the US emerging as the sole superpower. In Afghanistan, the civil war rages until 1992, when Najibullah's government falls and the Mujahadeen briefly seize power, only to be swept aside by the Taliban, a new force born from the war's chaos and Pakistan's support, which imposes a harsh Islamist rule by 1996. The Soviet misadventure, driven by Cold War fears of losing influence, becomes a textbook case of imperial overreach, its costs far outweighing any short-term gains from installing Babrik Karmal. Historians still puzzle over Moscow's decision, pointing to miscalculations by leaders like Leonid Brezhnev and Yuri Andropov, who underestimated Afghanistan's resistance and overestimated the PDPA's ability to govern. The war's ripple effects, refugee crises, radicalization, and a fractured nation leave Afghanistan vulnerable to further conflict, culminating in the US invasion in 2001 after al-Qaeda's attacks. For Afghans, the Soviet war is a wound that never heals, its devastation etched into the landscape and collective memory. While the world learns a hard lesson about the perils of foreign intervention in a land where empires go to falter, the invasion, meant to secure a foothold, instead ignites a fire that burns through Afghanistan, empowers global terrorism, and reshapes geopolitics, proving that even superpowers can be humbled by the fierce will of a determined people, fighting for their way of life.